Pradhanamantri ji, Namaskar. Sir, we have achieved soft landing on the moon. India is on the moon. Sir,
Good evening, sir. A hearty congratulations. As we know, India is celebrating because of yesterday's ISRO's achievement. Pragyan rover and Vikram lander has successfully landed at South Pole on the moon. Let us start our discussion with your opinions on this event.
As you said, Arjun, yesterday was a very proud day. It continues today because the moon rover, Pragya, has been successfully sent onto the moon's surface. It's now moving about slowly, taking pictures and conducting tests. 25 or 30 years ago, it would have been very difficult to imagine that India would be treated as one of the pioneers in space science. So today, we are the first ones to land on the South Pole of the moon, and only the fourth ones to be able to accomplish soft landing on the moon is quite a remarkable feat. It requires integration of so many things, and I think we successfully did it. And what's even more lovely is the earlier failure of Chandrayaan 2 became actually a stepping stone for success. We learned the lessons from there, and the satellite orbiting the moon is actually a remnant of Chandrayaan 2, so we utilized it effectively, and we built in redundancies, etc., to overcome the difficulties we encountered in Chandrayaan 2. And that we accomplished it at an incredibly low cost. All this cost us just about 75 million US dollars, about 600 crores or so. Whereas globally, typically it costs 5 to 10 times that for a mission of this kind. And throughout history of ISRO, very frugally, at a very low cost, our scientists and the ISRO team, they have done a remarkable job to put India on the space map consistently. I think 1969 ISRO was created. So in the past 54 years, the total expenditure incurred by ISRO, allocated by the Indian Parliament in the budget, if you take the money at the value of dollars, at that point of time, there was a time when a dollar was only 10 or 12 rupees, later became 25, 30, 40, 50, 60, now it's 80, a little more than 80. So if you take the current value on that day of our budget in dollars, the total expenditure incurred by ISRO so far is only about $18 billion. Now consider 1 year's NASA budget, the American Space Agency, National Aeronautics Space Administration. NASA this year, in 2023, the allocation is $25.4 billion. In 1 year, NASA has allocated more than what Indian Space Agency has spent in 54 years. So it's a remarkable feat at a low cost, largely with indigenous technology. Of course, we certainly utilized the benefit, to our benefit, the experience of earlier space missions, because mankind progresses and prospers that way. We learn from each other and we build a higher platform. But all in all, I think all Indians felt taller, each of us by a foot taller, and we felt genuinely proud, and we hold our heads high. For a country which was under colonial subjugation for a long time, which lost the global plot in the last few hundred years, this is one more lovely reminder that if we do right things, we can accomplish things on par with the rest of the world. Let's rejoice and utilize this platform to build more and better.
Sir, regarding expenditure on Chandrayaan 3, a lot of people are expressing their concern. Their perspective is whether in a developing country like India should spend such an amount on experiments like this. Second part of my question is, institutions like ISRO are able to achieve milestones with such an efficient way of using resources. With such a low amount of cost, they are able to achieve milestones like Chandrayaan and other things. So why are we not able to see such a kind of service delivery with respect to other institutions?
It's a great question. It's a great question. First, about the cost you mentioned. I already mentioned it's only about $75 million. And in pure science and technological development, there cannot be a private sector which will do, because there is no immediate profit. So government has to step in. That's why in pure research and space sciences, all over the world, even if private sector is involved, SpaceX is involved, Amazon is involved in America, other companies are involved. In Britain, Virgin Atlantic is involved. But the funding substantially comes from the government in the basic science research, because if government doesn't do it, nobody is going to do it, because private sector can enter only when there is a developed market, when there is a buyer of your services or goods. When there's no revenue stream, they cannot be private. You can involve the private sector in research and development, but funding has to come from the government. And it's very cost effective. Therefore, there are some people occasionally who are saying, is it a priority area for India? We have so much of poverty. True. But for a country of India's size and aspirations and potential, you cannot ignore the frontier areas of science. We cannot be always consumers of knowledge and technology. We must also be creators of knowledge and technology. Particularly when you're doing it at a low cost, when there are so many spin-offs, many, many things came to the world through space science. Initially, it may be only exploration. It may be scientific curiosity. But you develop many tools and many technologies, including in relation to healthcare, in relation to propulsion. Artificial intelligence was used yesterday in landing this lander safely, Vikram safely. So the integration of so many things, and in machine designing, all kinds of things. So there are many, many spin-offs, apart from stimulating the manufacturing and service industry related to the space programs. So to think that this is not beneficial is not a very wise approach. We need it. If it's a commercial entity we are creating, then we have to see the cost-benefit analysis. We have to see the opportunity cost. And you have to make sure that we can actually compete. With the same money, can we do more or better is what we should think. Given the low cost of our space programs and the benefits, and the fact that it's a pure science, this is necessary. Now, why can't other institutions function as well? I think it's a very important question. In general, governments all over the world are treated as inferior to private sector because the incentive to excel and the profit motive disappear in government. So bureaucracies function in a very rigid manner. They are wedded to their own values, inward-looking, slothful, very rigid and wooden, inflexible, hierarchical, and they don't really deliver. They are not focused on the outcome. They are focused on the processes and so on and so forth. But ISRO is different. Why? Because it's patterned after a model which is now known in the world as executive agency model. It was not coined in 1969. The executive agency idea came only at the end of the century. Only around 2000 or so, the idea of executive agency model that came about, and we call it new public management. So Britain, Australia, New Zealand, Canada, other countries, they started. Much of the world is in some form or other embracing that. So what is this model, executive agency model? ISRO chairman is appointed by the government, but even that government does not impose somebody on them. By common consent, the person with the great scientific credentials and experience is chosen. But once chosen, the government does not do micromanagement. They will not appoint again section heads or others. In a government agency, they appoint a director, then joint director, then deputy director. Everybody is appointed by somebody there. There is no team. Unless the team works in cohesion and with complete autonomy, you will not get results. So government directs them every day what to do. ISRO government does not tell them what to do. What does government do? Government simply gives broader priorities. In a case like ISRO, you cannot give specific mandates. You cannot say by so-and-so date, you shall go to Mars or something, because that depends on the way science progresses. Therefore, they give a broader goal. In some other agencies, there can be a specific goal. But apart from setting the goal, they don't micromanage in the organization. Two, they give adequate resources. Without giving adequate resources, but to simply say you do that is pipe dream. These are wishes. It's a wish list. And then they give the authority to make decisions. But they hold the agency to account in terms of outcomes. All right, this is what is the overall mandate and these are the resources. You are given the autonomy to deliver. Tell us what you have accomplished. So outcomes are monitored and there is accountability. This is the executive agency model. In some other cases where there's actually delivery of a public service, you treat them as a profit center, though there's no profit there, but you actually measure the actual outcomes, physical outcomes, how many houses built, or whatever is the area in which they're working, so that you can monetize for purposes of accountability how much they have done, what they have taken from their treasury. That's the way executive agency model works. ISRO is a perfect example of that. But there are other agencies who function somewhat similarly. Take, for instance, BARC, Baba Atomic Research Center. It functions pretty much on similar lines. Because there are national security implications, nuclear material and all that, it's not so much in the public domain. Otherwise, it's expected to function in a similar manner. Take a better-known organization like, very little talked about, not very glamorous, old postal service. It's a remarkable thing. They do very well because very clear inputs, very clear outputs. Mandate is given in a poor country where you don't really know most of the addresses. Somehow the letters reach, the parcels reach, money order reaches. Postal savings works beautifully. Many other services they're delivering of late, that works very well. Because there is a culture, there's a system which is driven by the desire to get outcomes, not merely the processes. Processes are all designed to get outcomes. Processes are not independent of outcomes. So it's not a rigid organization, you have to deliver. Railways, yes, there are many problems because there's no money, infrastructure is inadequate, signaling is poor, track is not strong enough to sustain very fast trains, etc. We are trying to address them. But basically, railways do function. They carry millions of passengers every day. In the olden days, they used to be late by 1 day or 2 days. Now, in general, trains are not late. Airports Authority, managing the airports, the whole air traffic and all that, is a very complex operation. We do as well as anywhere in the world. Take National Highway Authority, building national highways. We do it superbly. The speed and the quality of execution and the predictability and transparency. It's pretty good. So that means in all these agencies, we introduce the principles of executive agency. Autonomy, non-hierarchical functioning. You're not simply subordinate to somebody and taking orders. You function as teams in pursuit of tasks to achieve the goals. You function as a cohesive team, working together, not as a hierarchy saying yes to the bosses. You have resources, you have the authority, and you have accountability. And you have operational autonomy. These are the basic principles. Even in general government, there's the areas of your revenue department, your police department, other departments, municipalities. There's so much of complaint of delay, inefficiency, laziness, treating people without any respect, disregarding public concerns and other issues, and of course corruption. We all know, every Indian faces this every day. Even there, whenever in specific context you create an executive agency kind of a model, the whole agency does not change permanently. But on occasion, for special tasks, we do something like that. For instance, when our elections are conducted, for a poor country, our election management is superb. We conduct elections absolutely on time, in a systematic and transparent and credible manner. Yes, a lot of wrong things happen behind the scenes. Vote buying, political parties offering all kinds of short-term welfare. But that's a different issue. It's not about election conduct. The election conduct of India is a model. Very peaceful election. And people are not, the gun is not put to the people's heads to vote in a certain way. They vote voluntarily. Wisely or unwisely is a different matter, but voluntarily. The votes are counted honestly and competently and quickly. Result is announced. And verdicts are generally respected because they know everything is transparent and fair. Look at America. How even today, 3 years after the election, Donald Trump is saying, no, I was elected, not President Biden. India had never seen such a situation. It's a remarkable triumph. We don't recognize that. They do very well. Take UPSC. It functions very well. UPSC is one of the underappreciated organizations in the country. The selection of officials at the national level and senior positions happens clockwork-like systematically. Take, for instance, disaster management. When there's a flood or cyclone or something, the same moribund administration comes alive, becomes very efficient, despite our poverty and lack of technology. And we do a pretty good job, a remarkable job. Whether it's a tsunami or an earthquake or a cyclone, Indian administration does a pretty good job. Take VIP visits. A president comes or a prime minister comes. Suddenly the same administration behaves very competently. That means in those select situations, you created something similar to executive agency. What is the central principle? Authority, the power, and the responsibility, accountability. They come together fully. Normally in government, you have a duty to do something, but you don't have the power. You have to go to somebody else. That he who has power has no duty. Everything is pell-mell. God knows who is responsible for what. But in these situations, you created the complete alignment between power and purpose, between authority and accountability. Whenever you do that, the system functions very well.
In this backdrop, what lessons our government and young generation can learn from it? And do you think this is an occasion where we should reflect that imbibing of values like scientific temper is very important in the young generation?
It's a great achievement. We should all rejoice, embrace it. Because, for a country like India, with a very imperfect democracy, with the challenges of democracy, with the diversity, enormous poverty, and illiteracy, and coming out of the colonial hangover, it's rare to get such moments of enormous success. But one swallow, as they say, does not make a summer. Therefore, we must look at two things. One, what we discussed earlier. How can we make all government function this efficiently, this effectively, this competently, and deliver to the ordinary people? Rule of law. Nobody feels in India that if you go to a court or a police station, you get justice quickly and fairly and inexpensively. No. Might is right in India. So, people, while constitutionally we're equal, we don't have equality before law. Or take basic infrastructure. We are improving the roads and other things, but compared to global standards, we are still at the bottom, remember. And many, many indicators, physical infrastructure, rule of law, electricity consumption, education, healthcare, India is at the bottom of the big countries. Consistently, India, Pakistan, Bangladesh, Nigeria, these are all almost always at the bottom. We have a long way to go. Therefore, how to improve delivery across the board? ISRO shows that it's possible. We don't have to think of Singapore all the time. Singapore, everybody talks about remarkable efficiency and great outcomes in Singapore. It's almost a model country. Now, we have shown that we can do it too. Therefore, if we don't apply these principles and do it everywhere, we're not going to get the benefits of all this. It will be merely one day's celebration, and the rest of the days we keep worrying and we keep regretting. The second is younger generation. Instead of superstition and all kinds of foolishness, we must make them think very carefully, rationally. We must make them understand the basic principles of science and technology, how modernity works, how great things are possible in this era compared to earlier eras. Of course, everything is built on the foundations of the past. We must respect our tradition, our families, and all the great virtues of our culture. But we must build on that and then become very modern, like other societies have become. China is now progressing so well because they've also become a modern society. And we can easily become that. We have shown in the form of ISRO or many successes of our people elsewhere in the country or the world. But that's not enough. ISRO had maybe about 1,000 engineers involved in this whole thing, engineers and scientists involved in this enterprise. In a country of 1.4 billion people, In a country where every year about 15 to 20 lakh engineers are trained, to get 1,000 quality engineers is not that difficult. But the challenge is, can we make sure that every engineer is of quality? Can we make sure that every child gets good education to fulfill her potential? There are so many bright brains here in this country. Only because circumstances of birth, depending on the parents' economic status, their education, most children are not getting an opportunity despite nature giving them the brains. Because we have not given them true education. We have many university graduates without serious understanding and knowledge. We have 95%, 96% pass or great scores in 10th class or 12th class examination, but most of them, they would not really be considered as of reasonable competence or skills commensurate to that level and age. No, we are not. So unless we improve our quality of education, and unless we improve our institutions and improve delivery, we cannot do such things consistently. Our next generation is young, eager. We have the demographic dividend because India has the largest young population in the world. But in order to take advantage of that, on the one hand, we must promote scientific spirit and encourage them and allow them to imagine a better world, capture their imagination, stimulate their minds. On the other hand, we must give quality school education. That is the foundation. Followed by really meaningful, application-oriented, skill-oriented, and problem-solving oriented, innovation-oriented higher education. And our education is incredibly inadequate. There's a lot of demand in society, but the supply of education is very, very weak in the most part. Only a few institutions. And so only about 20% of the kids who are going to schools are getting some reasonable skills. 80% are very, very underserved for no fault of theirs. In many states, we see 96% pass, 100% pass, 99% marks, cut-off marks are 98%, 99%, etc. But when you see the achievement surveys, for that class, for that level, how much do they know? Only 10 or 15% of the children, they actually know as much as they should know at that level. So only 10-15% actually know, they are learning. How can you have 99% passes? We must acknowledge it. There's no point cheating ourselves because then we are cheating our children, the next generation. So both inspiring them to great deeds and giving them scientific spirit and improving the quality of education and services. Both these are our challenges and we must be inspired by this wonderful achievement. We must not give up and say, no, this is like India. India is like this only, which is nonsensical. We can be as good as anybody else. ISRO has proved it. Many of our Indians who went abroad and they are doing remarkable things, they have proved it. We are not inferior to anybody by birth or by race or skin color or religion. We just have to do the right things in the right way and give skills to our children. If we do that, very quickly in a decade or two, we can be in the company of developed countries. We can every day be proud and tall, not merely once in a blue moon, and we can fulfill our potential. And we can be prosperous. We can eliminate poverty completely.
Thank you, sir.